Hello guys, welcome back. I've got another awesome interview for you guys today. I'm here with the lovely Annwyn Avalon,
Hello.
who is a water witch and water priestess and an author. I've got what's your new book that's coming out? You've written Water, Witchcraft, Magic and Law from the Celtic Tradition. What's the new one that's coming up?
The next one that's coming out is called The Way of the Water Priestess, and it drops in January.
Yay! So Annwyn does a bit of everything. Yes, go on. Go show the book.
I was just going to say, I have a little postcard that I can show you so that you guys can find it on Amazon. It's one of my favorite paintings that they used. So,
John William Waterhouse.
Yes.
Love. It's a gorgeous book. Gorgeous book cover. Shush things. I don't need things going off in the background. So we're here today and we're going to talk all about water and witchcraft, basically. And I know that Annwyn writes on Patheos as well as an author for herself. And one of her articles recently got me very excited. And I nearly spoke about it before we were recording. I was like, no, we've got to turn the recording on quick. So in that article, you were talking about the many energies of water and how a lot of people, they kind of put like this woo aspect almost to water when it can be both. It can be both. I hate using the terms light and dark, but you know what I mean. It can be beautiful and healing and positive, but the ocean, I swear to goddess, frightens the living daylights out of me. I'm convinced that's how the world's going to end, in water. So, I was like, absolutely. So did you want to just tell us a little bit about that article, a little bit about the energies behind that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So water is this vast element. It, like you said, it embodies love and light on the surface. But when you get deep down into the depths of the water and into the depths of the ocean, even at the bottom of a pond, it becomes dark and murky, and there's a lot of, it's obscured. Lots of the vegetation and the creatures and everything that live in the bottom of the ocean are very hidden. And so it takes on that aspect as well. And I think that a lot of times we get caught up in that water is healing and love, and that's so true. But some of the most profound and deep healing doesn't come from the love and light on the surface, but that dark, mysterious void where you really can process the shadow and embody some of those energies. And like you said, the ocean, I mean, we all love going to the beach on a beautiful sunny day, but there's still sharks and the anglerfish. I think the anglerfish is, do you know which one I'm talking about with the big teeth?
Yeah.
Right on its head. Yeah. You know, it's actually not a small fish. It's very big, and it's scary. And I think that the water can have spirits that are that way as well. Doesn't mean that they're bad. Scary doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad. We see that with a lot of the fair folk, where they seem very intense and perhaps to some people scary, but that doesn't mean that the interaction is negative or bad. And throughout time, throughout history and folklore and mythology, we have mermaids, and we have these beautiful stories of, you know, mermaids getting beached on the at low tide, and people helping them back to the ocean, and then receiving gifts of like magic or healing or magical tools. But then we also see the other side of that, which is angry, vengeful, drowning spirits, a lot of times mermaids, that will take a life or will suck you down into the ocean. One of my favorite stories is about an old sea captain that captured a mermaid at sea and brought her back to his pond on his estate, and she lived there for years and years, and he died. And so after he died, nobody released her from the pond, so she was there. And from that point on, she'd pop up and she'd entice people into her pond. And they would go in thinking, and she'd say, oh, I have this treasure. And so they'd go in looking for the treasure, only to realize that they'd been caught. We even see this this death and life and beauty and bane play out in the pre-Raphaelites with poems like La Belle de Sans Merci, which is about a man that falls in love with a water nymph at a lake, and at the end of it realizes that she's captured him and now he is also dead, like all the souls that she had captured before. But it's said in such a beautiful ballad that it's so beautiful. And I think that a lot of that paradox of beauty is bane, and perhaps the dark is the healing. You get a lot of that where you don't have these light and dark polarities. You have the light, but it can manifest good or bad, and you have the dark and it can manifest good or bad, healing or bane. I mean, it's just everything. It mixes and churns, and there's so much to explore. And every time you think you get down deep, your layer, and there's something else. But I want to circle back around really quick and just add that there's a lot of magic in that light that does play across the water as well. It's just a different type. But yeah, where the light hits the water and it twinkles is beautiful. But there's healing in the dark too.
It's one of my favorite analogies of how I feel about spirituality is actually light on the ocean waves, because I'm like, how much of it we understand, as in the light hits the waves and we understand that bit on the surface, and we can see a little bit down, even though it might be a little bit more obscure, but then there's all of those layers underneath that we do not know what's down there, and we literally don't know what's down there in the oceans, which is crazy to me. There are creatures in the ocean we don't know about.
So many. Oh my gosh. And you know, I have theories that in some of the places that we haven't explored, there are creatures that we have never even like fathomed. And things like the Megalodon, which we think are extinct, perhaps is not. So, or maybe that's wishful thinking. That's one of the ancestral water creatures that I work with, or water spirits that I work with, is the Megalodon, because that's a really good spirit to work with. Really good fierce protection, and yeah, but I think that there might still be some.
What's that like, working with Megalodon as a spirit?
It's interesting because it's you would think that it would be intense and big, but there is a bigness, a vastness to it. But I've always had a deep connection with finding shark's teeth from when I was really little. So all I wanted to do was look for the shark's teeth, and I remember always looking for them. And my dad had like a very small meg tooth that I used to be like really obsessed over. And as I grew up and I got older, I started my own collection. And even as an adult, I would go back to these places and continue to search for these teeth. And I started actually finding things like bone. There's a place in Calvert, which is in Maryland, Calvert Cliffs, and it's a big Megalodon graveyard, and you can find bits of their bone washed up, and you can find big teeth and a bunch of other prehistoric sharks. But there is this calmness about the place that they're found, or their remains are found, which is Calvert. It's not a place with big waves. It acts more like a really big lake in a way. And it's just this really peaceful place. But then you've got things like poison hemlock that grows along the edges of this as well. So again, it's just this beautiful, calm place that has poison growing along the edges, filled with these giant remains from these creatures. Spirit wise, so that's kind of how I started working with them, was through their remains and just really working with the spirit of the place. And then they started coming through, and I started getting like, hey, you can call on us for protection. I call on them a lot for family protection as well, even though that maybe isn't a correspondence. It's unverified personal gnosis, right? So it's not in a book anywhere, but that's what I've been getting from them. And that could be a personal thing, or it could be universal. their teeth I use a lot in magic and for protective talismans. So I have a black one that I use, and it's charged for protection. And I've actually done some blood magic with it, and it's got some sigils on it. And having that active in my space keeps that energy also active. So it's a very active relationship. Not necessarily passive, like I'm just like, oh, hey, I need some help. I feel like I connect with them a lot. And I feel like sharks are really misunderstood. And so the Megalodon is the same. It's just the giant shark. And they've got this amazing ancient knowledge and power. And it's not like the water spirits who whisper in my ear. It's this energy that feels, what's the word? Great and ancient, and very allied to my work. Another thing that I do call on them for, besides personal work, is water activism. And again, unverified personal gnosis. I think that what brought about their extinction in the first place, or at least most of them being died off, I think they're very, very interested in what's happening in the water currently. And even though their physical bodies aren't perhaps present, we still have their spirit present, and they're very aware, just like the rest of the water spirits are, of all the oil that we're putting in, dumping in, and we're polluting things and ruining things, and there's so much damage happening to the water. And I feel when I started working magical water activism, I felt that I had a heavy push that they wanted to be involved. And so I call upon Megalodon's ancestral spirit when I'm doing protective work for the water, or if I'm doing counter magic for, over here we have pipeline problems. I'm sure you guys have seen where we're battling with our governments, and they're land grabbing and ruining just rivers and just the land. Like these pipelines, they burst and they seep into the land, and they're ruining everything. And so anyways, they wanted to be really involved in this. And so when I call on protection for water protectors or for a particular body of water, they're one of the spirits I bring in, because they're powerful, they're ancient, they've been here since way before we were. And their spirit is still present. It never left. So hopefully that inspires some other people to maybe work with the Megalodon. They don't seem to have the same energy as a mermaid, where if you mess up, you might get drowned yourself. Water spirits can be tricky if you piss them off. Same thing if with you working with the fair folk. Piss them off, there can be consequences, but I don't get that particular energy with the Megalodon. It's more of I'm Grandma Shark, and I've been here, and I've seen everything that's happening, and I see your energy, and I know what you're doing, and so I'll lend you some help because I agree with your cause, which is saving the water or whatever, magical protection, teaching other people how to do magical work. A big part of my coursework is to get people to go out to the water and do things like pick up trash, and begin to form relationships with the local spirits, and they'll come through when we start doing that. So sorry, I can get on long tangents.
No. I was going to ask about how people could start getting connected to water spirits. So that's really interesting as a part of that process on how to begin that. Do you feel that they're very ancestral then? There's definitely this vibe of and it's really difficult to put into words, isn't it? It's like ancestors of the world, and we're all interconnected through what I call the spiritual ecosystem and the web of existence. So they definitely feel like they have that kind of ancestral guardian of the water vibe to them.
Yes.
That's
yes.
yeah.
Exactly. And you know, I get a lot of questions from people too. Same thing is like, how do I begin working with water spirits or making contact? Or I tried to make contact and I got in over my head. What
Hmm.
do I do? Because that's something that's kind of important. Like we're a little arrogant sometimes, and we're like, oh, this area is like dirty. I'm gonna go and start doing magic to heal it. And you haven't introduced yourself to the spirits that dwell in the land. And so you just show up in their area starting to do magic, and they're like, whoa, we don't know you, get out of our house.
Hmm.
And so that is a lot of times when people have negative experiences with water spirits, where they're like, I felt like, you know, they were angry, or I wasn't getting any contact, or I had contact and now I can't have any. And so I always say, okay, stop doing the magic. Just, you don't need to. You need to meet the spirits before you do any work in their home, and then let them guide you, because maybe they do need to have energy work or magical work done, or maybe they just need your physical body to pick the trash up. And so that's one of the biggest things, is going and starting to sacred tend the area. And that's a little bit about what my second book, Water Priestess, is about, is taking it out of all of the history and folklore that water witchcraft has, and saying, okay, like, what if we began to look at water as sacred? And sure, we don't have water temples like we used to. I mean, there's a handful in the world right now, but you know, it's not like it was in the ancient world. So we can start creating those temple type of places again by just starting to pick up trash. And then the water spirits notice, and they're like, oh, hey, like, we see that you're actually caring. You're a different type of human. So we also see your magical powers. Let's work. And some of them are real grumpy, and they're just like, nope. I've had some that come in for a specific thing, and then they're just like, yeah, bye. And I've had some that were with me since I was a young child. I grew up in Florida at the springs, and just swimming in the springs and at the beach. And I didn't know at the time that I was having spirit contact. It was later on, years and years and years later, when I started learning magic and witchcraft and spirit work. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I remember having that conversation with that water spirit when I was 13. And yeah, like, I just always had that connection. I don't know why I keep remembering this story, but I'm going to bring it up. The water spirits are either with you or they're not. And in my case, I feel like they've been with me for my whole life. And in my students' cases, I see them come in at different stages. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Okay. So my students, I see these water spirits coming in at different stages. Some people, like me, have had that contact and they didn't know. And other people want the contact, but they won't get it. But, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought.
You're going to tell us a story that keeps coming up.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I was in the ocean with my older sister when we were, I don't know, I must have been 9 or 10, and she was wearing a ring, and it was something that my great grandmother had given to her, and it had slipped off. This wave came, and we were both in the water, and the ring came off, and she panicked and was like, oh my gosh, I just lost the ring. And I was just like, don't move. Now, we were up to here in the water, okay? Another wave comes, and I'm just like, just don't move. And I got a huge deep breath, like, just filled my lungs up, and I dove under. My eyes were closed because it's the ocean, and it was a real tumbly day, so you couldn't see much. But the ring was heavy enough that it hadn't moved with the waves. And so I was able to dive down. I literally pat around this much, grabbed it, and came right back up. And sure, maybe that was just a thing, but it was one of those, like, because I came up with it and I was like, here it is. And I was like, let's go back in and put it in the bag, and she was just like, how did you do that? Like, I can't believe you found it. And looking back years later, 20, 30 years, I don't even know how many years later, it's one of those moments that was like, oh, they were all like, they were with me. Like that was another like little roadblock to kind of be like, hey, remember we were there? And I had an experience in that same, like the water spirits in Florida are very, very active. About 12 or 13, I had another experience at Rock Springs. And it was an emotionally rough day. And I've always been the odd, misunderstood one in my family. So I was off being odd and misunderstood and crying somewhere. And I made my way to where the spring actually flows from the rock and into the water. And I started there and I was crying and I was mad and I jumped in. It's pretty narrow, this particular spring. It acts more like a river. So I jumped in. And I'm under the water and I'm still crying and screaming, and you can scream underwater and people can't hear you. So it's a really good way to like express yourself without alarming others. And they must have heard me because moments later, I smashed my foot on a rock. And I was just, at that point, I gave up. I floated down to the end. I rolled over. I looked at my foot and this tiny little indent wasn't really a big deal, except for the fact that it scarred me in a perfect triangle. And I actually still have it. You have to look now because I'm older and it's started to fade. You have to look real close. But for years and years on my left foot, I had this perfect triangle scar. And then when I learned that the alchemical symbol for water was the downward pointing triangle, it was one of those types of things that like, oh my gosh, the spirit's been here the whole time. And I find a lot of other people have similar experiences like that. Like a friend of mine was, I was actually drowning and I screamed out to, anybody to help me. And a water spirit came to me and the next thing you know, I was fine. And I was no longer drowning, and I was like on the side of the river. And this is from like modern magical practitioners that I get these stories from, and it's fascinating to me because without even reading folklore, you see the same patterns over and over and over. Every culture has that story, even in the modern day. We get that where, oh yeah, I was drowning, spirit saved me. Or I was upset and a spirit came to me, or I was just out and a spirit came to me. A lot of people think that say that the fair folk are kind of difficult to work with and they don't want to be worked with. And that's true to some extent, but in the past decade, the water spirits, I think, have kind of verged from traditional fairy folklore, and I find them more active, and I find more people kind of being like, I think I'm being contacted, or having some sort of like spirit initiation. And I really think that it's because of what's happening with our water. And we have so many new and like more magical practitioners, people that are really tapped into the spirits are popping up, every day. And that means that our energetic grid is activating at a certain or vibrating at a certain level. And some of these water spirits are like, hey, we see that, let's partner. Because we need the water just as much as they do.
Do you think that might be a reflection of us within them, because we are so much water in ourselves, so that as we change our energetic vibration, perhaps as a collective, or a magical collective anyway, that they're kind of feeling that vibration through their energy, through that connection of water to the self?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think so. We are, like you said, we're 70 to 80% water, depending on how hydrated or dehydrated you are. But you have water in you already. And so it's real easy to, I feel, connect with them. One of the things that I like doing is actually like submerging myself into water, lake or the ocean. If I can't, I'll use my bathtub. But it's almost as soon as I'm mostly in that water, I can just feel the connection. And I think that that's probably why some people get spirit contact and why some don't, is making sure that you are at that particular place or vibrating at that, or you have the resonance with that particular spirit or spirit.
I know something that I really enjoy, and water tent for me is the element that I go to when I want. It's perhaps the most, what's the easiest way of putting this? It's the most serious. So for the most serious healing, then I definitely go to water. And I quite often end up not living near water, even though I'm in the UK. So I'm not that far from water compared to in America. I do now, gladly, but it was always a pilgrimage for me. So I would always pilgrimage to the ocean, and it was a journey, and it was on purpose, and then it was for deep rituals of healing. But something else that I really love, and I know that you talk about Avalon a lot, is especially in ritual, but I actually live near Glastonbury now, so I can actually go, is to submerge yourself in water and then connect to the astral energy of Avalon within that. So to do that Lake of Avalon healing ritual within water is something that I have found to be healing and enriching and deeply mystical in a way that I don't know that any other place evokes that in me in the same way. So for you, how has Avalon impacted on your practice as a water priestess?
It's the whole reason for it. So I went through a traditional initiatory Wicca program years ago, over a decade ago now, and after my initiation, my priestess and priest were both heavy on the water astrological side. My priestess actually was like, "Hey, I found this program and I think you should look into it." Which, by the way, good teachers will recommend other programs for you to take, or they'll like search them out for you and be like, "Hey, I can't teach you this, but you should check this out." And so I ended up taking Mara Freeman's Avalon Mystery School courses, and it was just eye-opening. I was just like, yes, like I know all of this, like I can feel it. And as I was unraveling a lot of the information she was presenting things like Sulis, the goddess of Bath. And I was like, I've been there. I know her. And you know, my mother is from Birmingham. And so we spent a lot of summers there. And I went to Bath when I was 5, and then again when I was 8, and then again when I was 12, and over and over and over, because it was like the big tourist thing. But for me, it had like much more of an impact. I didn't actually visit Glastonbury until 2012. So I didn't go, I've been to Somerset and I've been to Stonehenge and Salisbury and all that, but I'd never actually been to Glastonbury, and I had been reading about it for several years at that point, and I was like, I really want to go. So I went there in 2012, and I came back like just different. It was, I didn't like Glastonbury at first, like the town. I was a little like, in my mind, I was thinking that it was more like mystical and it was like really like new agey, but my whole opinion of it has changed now. I love Glastonbury town. I love the unique people there and the culture. But because I was kind of avoiding the town, I was looking for other spots and looking to climb the Tor and do all the sacred sites, and I found the White Spring. And if you've never been inside the White Spring, like it takes your breath away. I remember that it was back when they had the blue doors before they had those beautiful iron gates, and I remember the doors being open and just like peeking around and being like, what is this? What am I looking at? And you know, it's got water on the floor, and so when you're walking through, you're actually like sloshing through the water. And then I was over at the Chalice Well, and I came back and I was like, I mean, I've always had this deep connection to water. I've always like, you know, I lived in Okinawa for a while, which is an island in Japan, like on the beach, and they have priestesses and sacred water sites. So I've been practicing magic there as well. And so I had like all of this stuff where I was like, wait a second, like this, and this, and all of this is all water. And it was there in Glastonbury where I was like, this, I mean, I've always known that I was water, but this is it. Like, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And so I came back from that, and academically, I went back to school and I learned how, because I had an art degree. And so I went back to school for anthropology. I had to learn how to write. I had to learn how to research. I had no idea where to find the information. I just knew that there was stuff there that I needed to put together. And so I started going through archaeological journals and like looking at what they were finding at these digs and what they found at Bath and how the people at Bath were practicing. And same thing with Glastonbury. I read everything that I could. I've got old books from the 1940s on what they had done with the town and, you know, how they built the Chalice Well and the White Spring to where it is now. And I put together a 9-month water magic course, and it covers everything. I called it water magic because I wanted it to be open for witches, priestesses, people that might be like practice shamanism. But ultimately, it is like a water master course, and it takes at least 9 months to finish it. It's very, very dense and heavy, but it was actually the precursor to the book. And so when I used that to kind of be like, I'll put this into a book. And then the next thing you know, Water Witchcraft is being born. It was actually going to be a way bigger book. But I learned a lot from publishing, a lot. And that's that they wanted it a lot smaller. Like in my mind, I was going to put out this book, and I was just going to be like, here's this giant like book. We'll sell it for $15. I don't care. And we'll just like give it to everybody, and it'll be an entire thing. They can just begin to practice. And thank goodness for professional publishers who know what they're doing. Riled me a lot and really kind of were like, let's just focus on this one little thing. And so I have more stuff to add. I keep well, we didn't get this in the first book, so let's do another one. But like that visit to Glastonbury in 2012 was what started everything. It's what prompted me to like better myself so I could actually find the details and put it together, because I knew that there was a water cult that existed in Europe, and it's so true. It's not like a particular one, but it's like all these little pieces, and you can put them into this puzzle that gives you a really big overview of what a water practice looked like in the ancient pagan world. And I've had to pull a little bit from the Greeks and a little bit from the Romans, but then you have the cultures overlapping too. And so you get things like the Celts and the Romans having practices that are real similar. So I was able to kind of be like, hey, look guys, this is what they were doing. And then a lot of it was also preserved within the Catholic Church and work with saints and the wells, because we see that in the UK. That's a big thing in the UK is St. Mary's Well, St. Bridget's Well. And there's so many of them. And every time, you know, you see one, it's like, I know that used to be dedicated to a fairy woman or some sort of water spirit, because that goes all the way back to the Greeks, and even further, where we've got these water spirits being connected to the wells. Anyways, so after that, like that, the red and the white waters of Avalon are so important in my practice that I've taken it further, and I've tried to be like, well, how can we start to really work with that red and white spring energy? And I found there's actually red and white springs all over the world. And here in the Pacific Northwest, there actually exists a similar type of energy where Mount Rainier has both these red iron springs and these calcium springs, like the red and the white. And here in rural Oregon, there's a small little sacred spring called Wilhoit Springs. It was really popular about the early 1900s, but it's gone now. All that's left is just a little spring, like just a little panel where the water comes forth. But the interesting thing about that is it's the same color as the Chalice Well, or like Sulis's temple at Bath, where it has that orangey red iron. And there it is. And then there's this beautiful creek that flows right by it, and it's milk colored. It's got this white sand, and I have no idea why it looks like this because the rest of them don't, but it's got this white milky sand. And so these energies of this polarity, this white and this red, they're not just found there, they're found in sacred spots throughout the world. And so I encourage people to go to those places and check them out and do things like meditate with some Chalice Well water, and then meditate with another well water and see what the difference is, or if there is one. So anyways, the long story here, shortening it up, I ended up starting to work with some women in Arizona when I was living there, and we ended up forming a tradition called Triskel Rose, which is our colors are red, white, and black, which are the colors of the Celtic Otherworld. Mm-hmm. But there's a little known black well that's actually in Glastonbury, and the monks used it to wash their clothes, but it's in the ruins of Lady Chapel in the Glastonbury Abbey. And so there's actually 3 springs in Glastonbury. It's not beautiful like the white spring or the red spring, but it's there, and it really embodies this kind of like this dark, mysterious energy. And so there's actually a blog that I wrote called, it's old, called The Red, White, and Black Springs of Avalon. And I didn't know that the Black Spring existed when I wrote it. And I was writing about this metaphorical black spring that must run through the undercurrent of Glastonbury. And then my friend, Gina, who's the author of Avalon Within, she commented or messaged me and was like, hey, you know that there's a black spring? And so I went with her in 2018 with the Sisterhood of Avalon to we went on a pilgrimage, and I went and I made sure that I visited that one. It's got a plastic cover, so you can't get water from it or anything like that, but those energies of the Celtic Otherworld are right there in Avalon, and it just is amazing to me that the physical representations are there along with the sacred spiritual representations. So anyways, I get really excited about it. So our tradition actually works with the spirits of the landscape there. So Gwen Upnith and Bridget and Morgan Le Fay, Lake Ladies. And I call them Lake Ladies because if you read my book, there's actually a lot of Lake Ladies. There's a lot of stories about magical women that live in lakes or dwell in lakes, more so than just the Arthurian ones, which are very popular and important and like very famous of this particular grouping. And they're actually called, Lake Ladies in Welsh are called the Gwegath Annwn, which translates as wives of the underworld. And this is one of the spirits that I've worked with for a really, really long time. And I remember one year actually picking up a fairy tale book, I think in Scotland, for like £5. And it had all the old Mabinogi stories in it. And I remember opening it and just being like, what is this? Like, you know, it was a fairy tale book, but when I read it, I was like, I know all of this. Like, I mean, I didn't know all of this, but I like knew all of it. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those moments where I was like, this is real. And I think I was 15 at the time, and then, you know, boys and, and other high school things got in the way. But it's very, very fascinating kind of how spirits can speak to you sometimes, because they'll speak in your ear, they'll speak in your mind, or they'll put a book on a shelf that you're like, I have no reason, like I have no good reason for picking this thing up. I'm a 15-year-old girl that doesn't like to read books, but I'm gonna buy a book. You know, so kind of that like being drawn, that almost like that compelling, like following your gut. My friend Estrella Taylor's book just came out, which is Intuitive Witchcraft, and it's always about following your gut and listening to your own intuition. And for me, that was a big part of learning spirit work, was letting myself go where I was led, even though logically everything's like, don't do that because it's like illogical. But everything in your being is like, nope, this is it. This is where we're going. And really following that. And it's such an important part of not only like magic and witchcraft, but spirit work too.
Awesome. So we're about time, but it's fascinating. I could listen to you for hours and hours and hours. It's fascinating, and it's not a subject that I've read as much about. Some, but not as much as about, say, other elements for whatever reason. I think we may have to remedy that. Daisy's looking at me like I'm strange now. Daisy the cat is just off camera, everybody, and she's looking at me in judgment. So yes, I think we need to do a bit more research. So thank you so much for coming and talking with me today.
Thank you for having me.
And all of Annwyn's links will be down below, guys. So if you haven't checked her out yet, down there. Learn things with me. We need to learn. I have that feeling. So yeah, so thank you so much. It was really, really interesting to hear you talking about all these amazing elements of water witchcraft and water priestessing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was great talking to you.
And I'll see you guys soon. Many blessings, guys. Bye.